everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. I am thrilled about the conversation that we're going to continue having today. Last week, we got into this amazing conversation about kids and coping, and parents and coping, and the ways in which we engage each other in order to be able to forge our lives forward. Now, there are going to be times, of course, when we don't have that flexibility or the ability to just keep it moving, as people would say. But today, we're going to give some tips and tools that we can put in our toolkit in order to be able to make our best effort. Today, we're going to be joined by Charlotte Avery, our family strategist. We're going to also be joined by Stacey Owens, our author, educator, and administrator, Dr. Tierney, our level up coach, and we're also joined by our special guest, Janine Halloran, our mental health counselor. Welcome in, everyone.
Hey,
Hey,
Dr.
ladies.
Nicole.
Hey there,
I'm
everybody.
loving this all girl conversation today. It's going to be one of those days where we can just kind of put all our parenting, skills out there, help some people really discover what it means and what it looks like to help our children find balance while at the same time not pull our hair out at every single turn. I want to start this conversation with Charlotte Avery. As you all know by now, she is a wife of one, a mom of seven. And it is in this space, Charlotte, where I want to ask you, how is it that when you are working with your children and helping other families, that you manage the weight? And I want to talk about two weights with everybody today: the WEIGHT, the heaviness of it all, but then the WAIT. It's the waiting game sometimes that gets us and our children in a flux. Talk to us about that for a moment.
Well, I will be honest and say that the weight and the load that I carry as far as, parenting all of the children and their different stages of life, I mean, at times it can be very heavy. And there really is no balance to it. I mean, as you know, I mean, I always say I don't balance, I blend. And so, I do my best to, carry individual weight since I have, seven children, because they make me carry differently when it comes to them. And so, sometimes that load can be really heavy. And I thank God for a really strong support system that sometimes when the load gets too heavy for me, that I can kind of transfer part of the burden. I don't know, I don't want burden to be a negative word, but I get to have the support and have somebody to be able to come in and help me and say, you know what, this is not my strength. This is something that's driving me crazy. I need you to help me to handle this. So that's one part of it. The other part of the weight, the WAIT part, is, just waiting sometimes on them as far as like seasons of life and being patient with them, knowing that they all are in different seasons of life. And so for me, it's me waiting and being patient with them, but also teaching them how to wait and be patient with themselves when they're not ready for certain seasons of life just yet.
Those seasons of life, Charlotte, sometimes do seem to tarry on. How do you compartmentalize it all? You mentioned about your littles, your middles, and your bigs, and then there's Charlotte, and then there's husband, and then there's business. How do you compartmentalize in order to find the balance that you need?
Compartmentalizing for me has to do with prioritizing. It really goes back to the blending part of about prioritizing. I don't do to-do lists or anything like that because to-do lists just drive me crazy. They make me feel very inadequate because the to-do list can go on and on and on. But for me, I look at the priority of what is important that day. I can go to bed at night and be like, oh, these are going to be my priorities for tomorrow. And then just by some martial law, something crazy could happen. And then the priorities all get shifted. So I really try not to like get so out of sorts with it when life just kind of throws me a curveball when it comes to them. And when it comes to me and business and my husband. But, I'm also a really good communicator when it comes to our family. So what I do, which is, I guess, could be considered part of compartmentalizing, is, I have conversations with my family and I tell them, this is my priority. This is what I'm doing today. And it could be a few things. And so sometimes, the kids be like, oh, well, can we do this? Well, no, because it's not part of the priority for today. And so I just try to keep all of my priorities in perspective, and then I just have to learn to be flexible when something happens that makes me have to shift and pivot.
I do want to ask Janine for a second about that because as it goes toward mental health, where do parents oftentimes, I want to phrase this properly, Janine, because there's that space when parents know they're about to go off the rails, and then that space where they're like, they just let things go too far. And they don't do, as Charlotte said, they don't prioritize, they don't compartmentalize, they just literally keep going, 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 and they never take a break. What are some of the warning signs?
I would say the warning signs are if you are yourself feeling that irritation, you're feeling like you're having very short conversations with your kids, like your temper is flaring up very quickly. Those are the moments where you're like, oh gosh, I need to make sure that I am taking care of myself. I'm prioritizing what I need to do to make sure I'm refilling my cup. Oftentimes when we are working as parents, we're working as caregivers, we're working as people who work with children who struggle. Our cup gets poured out. We give a lot, and we need to make sure that we are refilling our cup. We are doing things that are going to help fulfill us and do those things that are helpful. So it really does come down to, I think, being aware of your own sort of things that are the warning signs for you. So for me, I feel when my head gets too full. I feel that stress, and I've been able to tap into knowing what that is. I know what stress and anxiety feel like in my body. And when I feel that, that's when I know that I need to do something different. And I will say, I take the time to do things for myself. So I'm going on a bookcation with a girlfriend in a couple of weeks. I'm super excited about it. We're going to bring a ton of books. We're going to go and we're staying in Austin, Texas. We're going to eat a lot of food and we're going to read a lot of books. That is literally what we're doing for 4 days.
I love that.
And we've been talking about this, I think, for over a year. And so it's a countdown. I've got 38 days till it. I'm really excited. So it's one of those things where I know that is going to fill my cup up for a long time. So I'm going to do it. And I'm going to come back a better mom, a better therapist, a better wife, able to do the things that I need to do to get the house running.
Absolutely. Talk to us about that for a moment, Stacey, because there is the weight, and then there's the INGs that go on that, because it seems to go on and on and on. Like things just seem to get heavier and heavier. And then the time to get past them seems to get longer and longer. How are you helping staff, employees, your students, even yourself manage or balance the things that are taking forever to come to pass?
You want me to put my soul on the table today?
Let's do it.
Because I'm like, how is she describing my life? The weight, and the weight. It's like my life is so heavy. And I often look at times of thinking, this will be over next week. And then next week, something else comes along and make it even heavier. And I'm thinking, how can I wait past this? I think the biggest thing with becoming balanced is just remembering that all things come to an end. So I try not to see and worry about the end part. And I just try to go through whatever it is that I'm having to go through, knowing that this too shall pass. I think when we start worrying about the wholeness of it, that makes it even worse. Now it's heavy and stressful. Now my anxiety is on 10 and all my other body parts are falling apart. So I would say my best advice is try very hard to remove those worrying thoughts as they enter your mind. Every day, work towards whatever the heaviness is. Do a little bit each day, knowing that you've gotten one step closer to the end, But in terms of learning how to wait patiently, that's a hard thing to do as well. But I think it's just learning how to control your controllables. That's another thing that I focus on. How do you control the things that you can control? Let go. Because sometimes, the weights that we carry is revolved around us holding stuff that we shouldn't even be the ones holding anyway. So trying to figure out what parts of this that I have control over. And then if it's something that I can't control, can I get somebody else in on this to help me? And then know when to release. Just know when to say, right now, the weight is here, but I'm just not going to think about it. I'll release on you in a minute. I'll disconnect and just wait.
I like that. I'm going to go into a break because I want to come back at the next part of this conversation with Dr. Tierney, because it literally dawned on me as the ladies were talking that we have a problem. I mean, literally, we have this tendency, everyone does, to make permanent decisions around temporary situations. When we come back after the break, let's talk about that. We'll be back in a moment.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, sometimes the weight of waiting can get heavy on us. It allows us sometimes to feel as if we're never going to get from underneath it. And then we start making these decisions around things that are super temporary, but we can't see it and get the clarity we need because we're filled with heaviness or with burden, as Charlotte talked about. And then oftentimes we don't know how to prioritize or compartmentalize. Dr. Tierney, talk to us about that for a moment, because when we get into those stages of the weight of the world and then waiting on things to come to some type of closure, conclusion, or beginning, we just fall apart.
Absolutely. So my esteemed colleagues have pretty much said all the things that I was, thinking. But when we're talking about it impacting our decision making, one of the things that we have to realize is that life has an ebb and a flow. Okay. A lot of times we want to impose what we want on the ebb and flow of life, and we get bent out of shape because it's not flowing in the way that we think it should be flowing, not realizing that there's a grander design that's happening, here. And we can't, as you said, control those things that are not in our purview for us to control in the first place. So when we get bent out of shape, that is prime opportunity for us to start making some decisions out of our feelings, to start making some decisions out of some things that are really temporary, but because it has gone on longer than what we thought that it should be going on, we think that, oh, okay, this is the new situation now, so let me do this, or let me pivot, and do that. And we're not accustomed to waiting, so we've heard a lot of like what they used to call back in the day, the Burger King generation, where certain I think it was like Gen X's and, beyond were all like the Burger King generation. We wanted it when we wanted it, how we wanted it. But really, honestly, with the advent of all the technological things that we have, all of us are a bit Burger King, now. We're able to get what we want at a push of a button. We're able to call people when we want to. There's no more pay phones. We don't have to call waiting. We don't have that anymore because now it's automatic, and so that kind of got us into this space where we're not accustomed to waiting, and so when we have to wait for something, then we think that there's something wrong happening. So we'll make decisions thinking that there's something wrong when really you're just in the process and in the flow, of life. Now, I get why that can be difficult too, because when we're talking about the weight, WEIGHT, that things can be heavy. And there's been a lot that's happened in life recently that really has put a lot of weight on all of us, but this is that space where you have to invite people into the right people into your space to, one, help you carry the weight, two, to give you a different perspective, on the weight, and three, to give you some tools that'll help you wait while you are managing the weight that you are carrying. This is one of the number one things that you get when you are, with a appropriate therapist or coach, or, they're helping you to get perspective on your situation so that you're not acting out thinking that there's something wrong. We all have blind spots. We all need somebody else that has either gone before us in the situation that can give us a different perspective on the situation, or that can see something that we can't see in that situation to help you better understand exactly what you're carrying. You've heard me, if you've watched this show at all, you've heard me talk about the who. You've absolutely heard me talk about who you are, and this comes into play when we're talking about the weight that we're carrying, because when you know who you are, then you know exactly the things that you are and are not assigned to. So you have to assess the weight that you're carrying to see, does that need have your name on it? And are you carrying any unnecessary weight, that you don't need? And then looking at, okay, where am I and where is this leading to? And if we want something that's really valuable, you're going to have to wait on it. The only thing that comes out quick is something you stick in a microwave. Anything that goes in the oven, a crock pot, anything like that, you're going to have to wait on it. Same thing with your life. When you get into this space of these big dreams, these big goals, these walking into your purpose and all of those things, sugar, you're going to wait. That is number one thing that I really want you to hear me say. So if you're in a waiting season, understand that as you're waiting, that weight that's on you, it's only refining you. It's only making you better. It's getting you prepared for whatever platform, whatever purpose you're about to walk into. What you don't want is to shirk the weight and then shorten the wait, and then you get somewhere underdeveloped. Then you won't be able to withstand what comes along with that thing that you're ultimately trying to get to. You want to make sure that you are allowing the process to have its time so that you will have the character, the tenacity, the wisdom, the knowledge, the support system to be able to truly carry whatever it is that's on the other side of your weight.
Absolutely. I want to bring everybody back in because I think this is a great time to add something to our audience's toolkit. Dr. Tierney just gave us some things that we can think about when things get compounded. And I want to go around and ask each of you. I'm going to start with, she's going to hate me for this, but I'm going to start with Stacy. Because Stacy, I want to start with Stacy because I think this is a great place for us to build upon the conversation that Dr. Tierney is leading us from. And it's, what do you do, or what can you do when life seems compounded? I mean, we get into that space where everything is just packed on to us. The kids' schedules, our schedules, coming out of this pandemic, getting out, not getting out, what to do, when to do, prices are high. There's just so much that is compounding us that we have this tendency to kind of just shrink back from life once again and say, I'm out. But we don't want to be in that space. COVID gave us an opportunity to turn the page, start writing a new book, do a whole bunch of things new. So how do you, or how do we, Stacy, what do we do? Tell our audience something that they can do or can consider when life gets compounded.
I think first we need to take an assessment and figure out what is compounding us. Because again, as we can sort, you got to always be in control of sorting your life. So know what are the things that's burning you down, or the things that's overwhelming you, or just the things that you're doing. First, make an assessment, because then you can determine, what part of this life can I give to somebody else? And not in the sense that you're giving your life to somebody else, but is it some tasks? Is it some things? Is it some things you can let go? Is it some things you can gather to? Is it some things that you can share with someone else? So I think you got to start with taking just a self-assessment. And we should do that frequently. Like, I like to take a life assessment every 3 months if I can, just so I can figure out, where am I going? Am I going into the direction that I thought I was going to go in, or that I wanted to go in? And if not, what adjustments can I make? So I would say assess your life first.
Absolutely. Janine Halloran.
I would say the thing that you can do after you assess your life, which I think is a brilliant idea, I would say then build your community, because that's where you're going to be able to get strength, to get some support. So if that is getting mental health support for a child in your life or your own self, if that is getting a coach, if that is finding a friend that you can hang out with and do things with, if that is finding a new church family, if that is being able to figure out what are the things that are enjoyable for you to do, being able to join a club, being able to do art, whatever brings you joy, to be able to have that space for it, but to start creating that community for yourself.
Absolutely. Charlotte Avery.
So I have two things. One, I was listening to Dr. Tierney give us a whole great, wonderful sermon. I was like, hallelujah for everything that she said. But there's two things. One, I feel like when you feel that because there are times when you feel like life is just playing tug of war with you, and you're at one end of the rope and life is at the other end of the rope. Sometimes it's okay to drop the rope. Be okay with giving yourself grace and dropping the rope. And also realizing that delegation does not mean elimination. It just means I choose to delegate it to somebody else because I don't choose to do it right now. So it doesn't mean that it's getting eliminated. It means that somebody else is doing it. And I think that when we give ourselves grace and we stop trying to be control freaks, because, I can be very type A, but, sometimes I just have to look at things and be like, okay, I don't want to do this. It's not my zone of genius or excellence right now. So I'm going to give it to somebody else. I'm going to delegate it to somebody else. I don't like doing the laundry, so I delegate it to my children. Hallelujah. That's just how it is, I mean, and also knowing in this life, just like, Dr. Halloran was saying, your support system matters. Teamwork really does make the dream work. That's in your home and outside your home. That's when you're running a business. That's when you're managing a family. That's when you're, just trying to elevate and do so many things. So one, be okay with dropping the rope when life is, playing tug of war with you. And also give yourself grace enough to know that delegation does not mean elimination.
I think that everything that each of you have said gives us a space and time to say it's okay to not be perfect. And oftentimes when we're in that space of having to do everything for everybody, having to be the be all to end all, always the individual that people call upon, it gets to be too much. And oftentimes we don't know when, some of the points that you all have said, respect the process, take an assessment, build your community, and give yourself grace and delegate. All of those are really great tips and things to put into your toolkit. When we come back after the break, I want to unpack this notion that we have to be everything to everybody. I think that some of the threads that are running through this conversation that we're having is that being a mom, being the head of the house, being a spouse, being a significant other, it means that you have to be the one that always takes control. And that leads to self-induced stress. So when we come back, let's talk about how to alleviate some of the pressures from our lives that we put on ourselves. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, learning how to live balanced or blended can take a lot out of you, but it's really worth putting in the effort. But there's some things that we are doing that we should not be doing anymore. Like, at what age do you start teaching your kids to fold their own clothes, to put away their own clothes, to bring down their own laundry? At what age do you start teaching your kids how to cut up a sandwich or to fix their own lunch or leaving it on a lower shelf so they can come and get it themselves? We are doing the most and too much. So Dr. Halloran, Janine, talk to us for a moment about releasing some of our ownership and giving ownership back to our children to eliminate stress in the home and with ourselves.
What I think it's so funny when Charlotte was talking about giving the kids the laundry duties. I taught my kids how to do their laundry very early on because I too cannot stand laundry. And so they have been in charge of their laundry for several years. And it's been lovely. And what I wanted to do, not only to eliminate that for myself, but also to teach them how to be kids that grow into adults who can cook for themselves. They can wash their own clothes. They can fold their own clothes. They can clean the bathrooms. And so it really does eliminate that mental load for me when they are in charge of that. And I feel not only is it for me better in terms of my mental sort of load and the things that I'm keeping in there, but it's also good for them because they're learning how to be people. They're learning how to be people in the world who can live on their own. Like, so we go through and I teach them how to cook certain meals. I ask them what their favorite things are and we work on it. And so, you know, my son loves mac and cheese. So now he knows how to make a bowl of mac and cheese by himself. I think the other piece of that is if that you're sharing the load with a partner, another adult in the house, the conversation also has to go there because oftentimes we find as women, we are the ones holding the mental load. And so to have conversations with spouses and significant others about how to delegate the things that you just keep in your head all the time, like the grocery list. How do you manage all of that? So it's been interesting to talk through mental load with my spouse because he's like, what are you talking about? But it's one of those things where once he understood what was going on, then he was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And he started taking ownership of his own things and things for the house as well.
So let me ask you a follow-up question because related to that, how does that work in blended families where you're not my mom, you're not my dad?
Oh my goodness. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? So it's almost like whenever I talk with kids who have blended families, I say, you know, you have one set of rules at your one parent's house and you have one set of rules at another. And that's what it is. You have to code switch. You have to know what is acceptable at this house versus what's acceptable at this house. And I would say to the child, I've worked with kids who have been in this situation. I will say it doesn't feel great. It feels unfair, right? But you still have to be respectful and let's talk through this. And let's also think about the future when you grow up and what do you want to do? What do you want to be? How do you want to be in the world? And so to think through how do I interact in a way that reflects who I want to be? What can I control? Back to what we were talking about earlier, that what can I control versus what can't I control, and letting go of the things you can't control, because there's a lot you can't control, but you can control your own behaviors. You can control how you react to things, and you can control how you bring yourself into the world.
So Stacey, Janine brings up a really good point about this sense of community that we're building. Talk to us about how home and school and that balance should work, because oftentimes there's a disconnect between what parents are doing at home, what the school is teaching, and then the desire of the school for that to be integrated together.
Okay, so from the school perspective, I always tell my teachers, you need to understand the culture and understand what's happening in the lives of the students that you're serving. You need to know what type of family that they're coming from. You need to know what the home life is looking like, because you're about to set some rules in your classroom and some expectations and some norms that if you don't understand the culture of where your students can come from and you're not taking that into consideration, it can cause a huge disconnect. But then at the same time, I teach my parents when I have my parent trainings. I'm like, okay, we need for the language at least to sound the same between the classroom and the home. So if you have a student who, let's say, has been given some behavior problems in the classroom, and we bring the teacher and the parent together and we're like, all right, what strategies can we come up with? What awards can we come up with? How can we, what consequences and what rewards are we going to come up with? Once we establish that, what can you do at home to mirror this? So if the teacher says so-and-so met this expectation and she gave them a sticker, by the end of the day, the parent needs to know what that looks like. So when the child gets home, you can now also communicate and say, oh, you did well in this area. So now we're using a common language. Sometimes that can be tough if you don't have everybody at the table. But we spend a lot of time letting families know that we need to find the common areas that we can align between home and school, because when a child knows that relationship is there, that parent-teacher relationship is that strong, it closes what I like to call a lot of the rat holes. It closes up those gaps, because now it eliminates what my mom said. I hear that a lot. If I had a nickel for every time I heard, well, my mama said, when I don't have to do this. And I'm like, that might be at home, but here, this is what the expectation is. And then I immediately get on the phone so I can have that conversation and let the mother know, okay, we need to talk. because we can't go against each other. We got to pull in the same direction, because that's the only way that we're going to create that sense of community, so that the child will know that they can't play games like you're the mom and we're the dad, or the absent, whatever that they are missing in their lives.
I think that makes perfectly good sense. And I'm going to invite Charlotte into this conversation for a moment, because last season, Charlotte was suited and booted and at the school, and that hasn't happened yet. So I want to talk to Charlotte Avery for just a moment about the role of communication that parents should have with teachers and administrators. And then how do you show up at the school so that you are not stressed or bringing your stress to the school based on things that are happening in the home and with your child, or not happening at school or at home with your child?
So I think I'm pretty professional. I think I've got, like, I could probably win an award for all the times that I've had to go to school suited and booted. And then actually it's a miracle that I haven't had to do that yet. So I'm just going to, keep counting down the time. However, as a parent, I know what conversations that I need to have with my children at home, because I think it always starts at home. My children know before I show up at school that I want to know all the truth. I want to know all the facts, even if you got in trouble, even if you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Like, I want to know, because I need to know how to be the best advocate for my child that I can be. So my thing is, I don't go to school now I might be really emotional and really perturbed about something that my child told me that a teacher may have done or said. But what I do is I go armed with facts. I go armed with facts. I go armed with truth. I go armed with policy and procedure that anybody can find. And I go in there. So when I come in there, I'm not going in there as the mom that's just dropping off lunch in my sweats. I'm showing up knowing what I know, knowing and looking the part, like I know what I'm talking about. So when I go to school, I'm not flying off the handle and I'm not all in my emotions. I'm coming to you as another professional person, whether you think I'm professional or not, because don't get it twisted. People think that because I have 7 kids that I'm at home like Peg Bundy eating bonbons or something. They don't know that I'm a highly educated person. But when I walk through those doors, I'm not coming dressed down. I'm not coming with attitude or anything like that. I'm coming with the briefcase. I'm coming calm, cool, and collected. I'm not flying off the handle in all of my emotions, because my emotions at that particular time don't matter, because we are always perceived as women to be highly emotional people, even when we're dealing woman to woman. And so when I'm going into school, I'm going in very clear. I'm going in knowing what I want. I'm going in knowing the solutions and the actions that I want from a situation. And if they don't know the actions that they want, I'm addressing them right now. This is what I want the outcome to be out of this meeting. And sometimes, I've had to bring my children into meetings because and I prepared them, because I want my children to see how you properly and appropriately advocate for yourself. So sometimes I've had to bring my children into a meeting so that my child can tell their side of the story in front of the teacher, in front of me, in case there's any discrepancies in the story, because I'm not trying to pit my child against the teacher or pit me against the teacher or the school. I'm just trying to get all the facts so I can best support my child and make sure that they have what they need so that they can be successful in life and be successful in school. And so I think as women, as parents, I think when we're going into these situations, when it comes to school, teachers, especially good teachers in schools, you are a partner. You are a partner with the parent. Teachers and parents are partners together. And we should all want what's best for our children. Now, I understand that that's not always the case. I've been in situations where a teacher didn't want what was best for my child. But I go in there knowing that I want what's best for my child. And I'm very clear and articulate about what I want so that they know that I'm Charlotte. I'm not Shaniqua. I'm not down in any of the Shaniquas, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not coming in there in house slippers and sweats and stuff like that. I'm coming how you see me now, in a blazer and heels and my glasses and stilettos or whatever. And we're going to have a conversation that's very clear, that's very concise, and that's very action oriented, because you can't go to school and support your child not knowing what the actions are that you want out of this situation in the first place.
I think that what you said is very important. I'm going to start with Dr. Tierney and then end this block, but I'm going to come back with Dr. Tierney as well, because I think it's important that we figure out how to level up our adulting. Dr. Tierney, start us off, because the power of presence does matter, because oftentimes we're stressed with ourselves because our own, insecurities and what people will think and this, that, and the other. So kind of unpackage that for us for a moment before we go into a break. Give us a little taste, and then we're going to start it off again.
I mean, because when I get going. So I think going into the break, what I'm going to say is what we have to do when we're talking about the pressures and all the things. You kind of hit on something when you said our own insecurities. What we have to do is we have to assess exactly why are we putting the pressure on ourselves in the first place. It's easy to say, oh, it's because the school did this or the kid did that or my job did that. But let's really take a look at really where that pressure is coming from and why are you putting it on yourself.
All right, now, so let's take a break. I'm glad that she gave us just a little snippet of that, because I know she's ready. Y'all can see it in her face. She was ready to just go all in. When we come back after the break, let's talk about what it means and what it looks like to level up your adulting. We'll be back after the break.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, discovering how to be balanced is no cakewalk. But today, we're giving you some tools and tips that will help you and your children begin to move their lives forward, or whoever it is you're taking care of. You may be a caregiver for a senior adult in your family or another family member, but whatever that looks like, discovering how to show up and be an advocate is part of the process of discovering how to be balanced. So Dr. Tierney, take us in.
So it's really easy oftentimes to point the finger at somebody else, that they're the problem. They're the issue. They're the reason why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, or the reason why you're showing up the way that you're showing up, when really we have to look at ourselves. Okay, we have to look at, why exactly am I showing up in this way? Why exactly do I feel all of this pressure? And a lot of times we're putting pressure on ourselves, or we're showing up in a certain way, or we're reacting in a certain way because there's something that it's feeding on the inside of us. There's something that is unresolved on the inside of us. So when we were talking earlier and we were talking about, us kind of doing all the things or showing up in this way, we have to stop and say, okay, well, is that a coping mechanism to an unresolved trauma that I have? Is it that I feel that I have to be the only one that does this in order for me to feel okay? Is it that I have to put my need or put my name on everybody's needs in order for me to feel like I'm valuable or whatever it is? And ultimately what we end up doing is putting that pressure on ourselves instead of really looking at what we're doing to ourselves. We then blame the other people. We blame them for why we feel the way that we feel or why this thing is happening in our life, instead of actually stopping to say, you know what, I'm allowing it because in some way it kind of makes me feel like I'm worthy or valuable, or it's this thing that happened when I was a kid. So now for my kids, I fill in the blank with whatever it is. So when we're talking about actually getting to that next level in our life, we have to stop and look at us and say, okay, how am I showing up at this level? And what are those those pieces that I might not have addressed from my last level that are getting in the way now of me going from here to there?
Getting from here to there isn't always easy. Janine, talk to us about this thread. There's a common thread, this overcompensating and the stress that it can cause on all of us for feeling like we have to be all things to all people.
It is true. There is this thread of you need to be everything. You have to be the perfect mom. You have to be the perfect wife. You have to do all these things in a perfect way. And really, nobody is perfect. We're all human. We all make mistakes. I believe somebody also earlier mentioned grace. And there's this piece of giving ourselves grace, being graceful to ourselves when things don't go quite so well. But also, if we are starting to delegate and people do it wrong, in our way of thinking, right? You try and make sure that you're not doing everything and you're trying not to take it all on, but you're trying to give tasks away. Then you really have to give those tasks away, and you have to let again, I'm also a type A personality. You have to let that go, and you have to let them do it as they would. For example, when my kids fold their laundry, would I fold my laundry the way that they fold your laundry? Heck no. It's fine. Does it get folded and put in their drawers and put away? Absolutely. So I'm going to let that go. I'm not going to be over helicoptering them, trying to help them figure out how to fold their stuff. If it works, it works. They walk out of the room and clean clothes, get on the bus. Thank goodness. And so it really comes down to being gracious to ourselves, being gracious to other people as well.
So I'm going to ask Stacey this question because oftentimes we don't know how to pick our battles. So Stacey, how do you teach children and parents to pick the battles that they should fight? Because oftentimes that stresses us out as well. And we're just in this constant struggle between what mom said, what daddy said, what teacher said, what home said. But sometimes it's like, whatever, and keep it moving. How do you do that?
I mean, you have to know what is the end goal that you want, right? So I'm telling my teachers all the time, I call them power struggles. Like, don't get in a power struggle with a kid. You have to know what you want from them. State explicitly what you want, and then assess if they gave you what you want. But we get so stuck in, like the doctor just said, did you do it the way that I want it to be done? No. Did the task get done? If the task got done, then what's that happy middle ground that you can reach towards? But don't get into the power struggle of it has to be my way or it has to look like this, and then now y'all arguing back and forth. So don't get into power struggles. That's the biggest element that I think I see in schools today, is when teachers and students get in little power struggles with each other, and then now you're mad because they said something back or they didn't do it the way that you thought they should do it. And then the kid gets sent to my office. Now I got to stop what I'm doing to have a conversation that could have easily been resolved with the two of them just listening to each other and stating what they wanted and getting to the end. And in terms of parents, making sure that, they are picking their right battles. I think Charlotte is right. You should come prepared with exactly what you want the school to provide for you, but you also have to be open enough to hear the other side. I call it test and verify, because your child is going to come home and they're going to tell you their side of the story. Get all that data and research from your child, then come in and start the conversation by first listening to the other side. So now you can make an informed decision, and the two adults and the student can have a good discussion about how do we move forward. I'm all about being solution oriented. How this happened, I'm not going to get stuck in the what happened. I'm stuck more on what's the solution? How do we move past this? And how do we not find our way here again? So it's just, if you focus on the forward progression and the solution, it'll get you every time out of that space of being in the power struggle and picking battles that at the end of the day, it was pointless anyway, because you didn't even know what you wanted.
So
Can I just add something? Can I add something?
She gave
really
us a
quick?
great segue to that. Go ahead, Charlotte.
I wanted to say that, part of not being in a power struggle, whether it's in your household or even at school, I think for me, it really is how and when you communicate, especially when it comes to a school situation. Like for me, before I show up at school suited and booted, I have already emailed the teacher. I've already had a conversation with the teacher. And not only that, I've already had a conversation with the counselor. So when when I've gone through the chain of command, because it's quick to sometimes think, oh, I'm just going to go and talk to the principal. No, Charlotte always starts with the teacher. Then I go to the counselor. I include both parties. Then I start CCing everybody. And then once I still don't get what I want, or it's still not working out or what have you, then we come to the table. Once the table discussion goes awry, now I'm CCing everybody that I had a meeting with per our conversation meeting, whatever. And now I'm going to the school board. There are levels to this thing. And I think that when you are, and especially if you're not trying to be hurtful, for me, when I come suited and booted at school, it's not because I'm trying to be very aggressive with a teacher or an administrator, but it's letting them know, one, I really think you need to see my face, because obviously my kind big girl words didn't help you. So now let's have a conversation. Let's sit at the table and talk. And I think that when we are open to communication and everybody's not trying to, pull rank because I'm the parent, because I'm the teacher, because the thing is that we can all be learners of each other. We can all be students and learn something. There might be something that I didn't know. There might be something that a teacher or a counselor or a principal or another administrator might be more well-versed in than I am. Sometimes I'm more well-versed in some things that they're not well-versed in. But that's why teamwork makes the dream work. But if you're really open to really effective communication and not, trying to, pull your PowerPoint or your power play on anybody, but you're really going in there with the best interest of the child, then I think it works. It tends to work out better.
I think that makes a lot of sense. We're talking about the value and the role that adults play, not only in the lives of children, but what it means to keep us from being stressed out. And Stacey started us with some really good things about don't get into, and she said, don't get into a power struggle. Janine, what is something that you would say for an adult who's working with a child? Don't get into what?
Oh my goodness. So I would say, actually, my focus would be, let's focus on what is the goal for the child. So a lot of time I've worked in schools and I've been on the other side of the table as a parent. And my whole thinking has always been it's all about the kid. So what can we do as a team, as a community? We're all working for this child. So how can we help this child? Let's elevate, instead of getting into these power struggles. Let's focus on what we want. We want to be able to educate this child, be able to help them with their mental health. What can we do as a team to make that happen?
I think that's a very great point, because oftentimes we do have a tendency to get into the weeds. We go in with one agenda and then we start hearing all these things and then we get in our feelings. And then before we know it, we're all over the place. Stacey, you said not to get into a power struggle, but what is one other thing that you would also share? And then I'm going to go to Dr. Tierney and Charlotte.
I think you just said it best. Don't get into your emotions. Stay grounded, stay positive, and stay solution oriented.
Those are very good tips. Charlotte?
Stacey said everything that I was going to say, so I have nothing else to add. Go, girl.
Now, you know what? For those of you who are watching, Charlotte just gave us all the perfect response, because sometimes there's nothing more to add. People just keep wanting to keep going, that they miss their moment to find closure. Dr. Tierney.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. Literally, the emotion piece was where I was going to don't get into your emotions, because your emotions will lead you, in the worst possible direction. But then Stacey said it, so I would say what Stacey said, what Charlotte said, Stacey said. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that we're all on the same page. Bring everybody back in, because, this is one of those moments where this is what you want conversation to look like. When you've gone in and done all that you can do, when you've shown up how you need to show up, when you've presented your case and you get to a sense of resolution, don't add another thing. And because I've watched parents in counselors' offices or in the principal's office, and they'll say, and then the other day or last month, and I want to add. And it's like, here we go. We opened up a Pandora's box and a whole nother can of worms all over again. Mm-hmm. So as we round out this block, and people are, saying, oh, these were great tips. These were great notes. I now have something to do. And before the end of the year comes, there may be you, parent who are watching, grandparent who is taking care of your grandkids, and you may be at a loss. I want you each to give someone some encouragement in order to be able to keep moving forward as they're raising their littles, middles, and bigs. Charlotte.
My biggest thing is get your support system, find it, and know who your tribe is when it comes to raising your children and speaking into their lives and making them good, productive human beings, community citizens, students, and all the things. Because, honestly, we always say, it takes a village, but it takes the right village. And so my thing is, I'm always praying, Lord, show me my people. Who are the people who are supposed to be speaking into the lives of my children? Who are the people who are supposed to be speaking into my life? Those who have, a permission to say, Charlotte, I think you were wrong. I think you missed the mark, and just know who your people are. Find a support system, a reciprocal support system, because I believe that support systems should be reciprocal. It's not just about you and what you need, but it's about what you can offer to someone else also.
Absolutely. Dr. Tierney, a word of encouragement.
I would say know when to stop, just like what we were just talking about. Sometimes that compounded pressure we were talking about earlier is because we just keep going and going and go. Sugar, we're not the Energized Bunny. Take the battery out your back and know when to stop, and not put pressure on yourself, that then you put pressure on your loved ones and your children as well.
Absolutely. Stacy.
I would say just recognize that everybody comes to the table with their own personal toolbox, right? So don't get upset with the tools that you have. If you find that you've made a mistake or you didn't do something that someone else thought you could have done better, just always focus on, how can I buy a new tool? How can I learn something new that's going to make me stronger for the next time that I'm facing this?
Absolutely. And Janine.
The one thing I would say is remember that parenting is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There will always be opportunities to have teachable moments. And while teachable moments may come up, you will let some slip, and that is okay, because there will always be another one. You know where they live, you can get back to them.
Absolutely. Thank you all for the tips that you've given our audience to be able to put into their toolkit. When we come back, I'll give my reflections.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, as we always say, discovering how to be balanced isn't easy, but it is achievable. So take some time to exhale, give yourself grace, talk to your children about your expectations, what you want them to be in the home and outside the home. I clearly recall growing up and being told, remember what your name is and who you belong to. And that for me meant I represent a sense of community. I represent a family. I represent people who care. So when I got out into the world, I wanted to show that. So let us be on one accord today, moving forward to help ourselves and others present themselves to the world in the best possible light. Thank you all for watching and have a great day. Bye now.